Hey guys, this is Dylan, co-host of Art of the Flow podcast. In our last episode of 2019, episode 170, it's called Is That Stealing? My co-host encouraged me to walk everybody through what goes into editing a photo that I release on Patreon. I create content for people to use for their float centers. I take hopefully beautiful photos of individuals that are material that you can use for your float center, whether it's your website, billboards, Instagram, email, all that good stuff. So in the future, I would love to make a video of behind the scenes of an actual shoot, but for now, I'm going to stick with the post-processing in Lightroom and Photoshop. This model goes by Crystalline. This is the image that we're going to work on here. As you can see, she's stunning. She has a gift for posing naturally in some really expressive ways, which were awesome. So she was a real treat to work with and ended up making some of the, I think some of the best shots I've made so far. The model definitely has a factor in that. First of all, I wasn't sure what photo to use for showing these edits because it's different every single time. Sometimes I use Photoshop, sometimes I don't. Whether it's a really up-close portrait, if I'm deleting the float tank, there are all these different factors that can go into whether or not I use these particular tools. And then finally I just said, record the one that you're going to edit next. And that was this photo. So that's what we're going to do here. So I won't be showing every technique I use, and I don't use every technique in this image in every shoot. But this will give a good idea, I think. All right, let's get started. So I'm beginning with a couple very basic modifications to the exposure so it doesn't look super bright while I'm editing it. And then I grab the light curve to increase some of the brightness and drop some of the darks. So nothing too drastic, but just kind of making it a little bit more aesthetically pleasing while I edit it. Next, you can see me doing the spot removal tool, which is an incredibly beneficial tool for getting any fabric that might be floating in the tank from a swimsuit, hair, bubbles, anything that's fallen to the bottom of the float tank that has color. It's great for removing these things, and also for anything like a pimple or a blemish, anything that's really small but that the model might not want to see there that they don't have. You know, like a mole you would leave, but if they have a pimple, that kind of blemish is, I think, pretty easy to choose to remove. There are a lot of bubbles in this image, and I don't understand why there were so many. I do like to create a lot of motion in the water. Over time, I've found the more ripples there are, the better an image looks, the more you can see it looks like water. People instinctively love water, and so seeing those ripples makes you feel good, I think. So here I'm using a spot tool to remove all the bubbles. I like doing this in Lightroom because I can see where Lightroom is sourcing the replacement image. Every time I click on a bubble, it's grabbing a little screenshot of another part of the image and blending it in. In Photoshop, you can do the same thing, but it doesn't show you where it's sourcing from, so I like to do it here. This is not the most entertaining thing in the world to watch at all, but believe me, it's also not fun to do, so that's fun. Next up, I'm removing the edges of the float tank so it looks like anybody's float tank. I want it to have this particular look so anybody can use this for any float center, and the viewer won't be going, wait a minute, but there's not a wall there, or there's not, they can't tell. It's just the concept of floating that's being portrayed to the viewer. I'm using Photoshop now. I'm using a spot removal tool. I don't know why I'm using a spot removal tool here. Usually I would do a selection and then a content-aware fill, but either way, it's working fine. But as you can see down here in the lower right, it isn't. It's trying to extend out the hair, and it's just not looking right. So I'm ending up doing a stamp tool to add some texture here. So I'm selecting to the left the image and then painting it to the right. And then I'm going to grab an actual paintbrush tool and select the watercolor and paint that to the right here. And just make it look like the water is extended out so it matches the rest of the image. Next, I'm using something called frequency separation to clean her skin up a little bit. Frequency separation is really cool. It essentially works like kind of like how a sound wave works, where like low volume, low frequency are these big, long waves. High frequency are these little waves going back and forth. Same thing with light. So here, low frequency is going to be color, skin tone, the redness in her cheeks, whereas the high frequency are textures, lines in the face, pimples, anything that would be under the designation of texture. So what I'm doing is editing those separately so that I can, if there's like some rosacea or something like that, I can soften that out. And then as far as the textures go, it's a really safe way to remove things like pimples that the model might not want to be there. You know, you wouldn't remove a mole, that's part of the person, but on any given day they come in with some pimples that they'd prefer not be there. You can easily go in, delete that texture without affecting the color underneath it. Whereas normally with the spot tool, you're taking the color and the texture. So this is a really nice way to kind of smooth things out, clean things up without really without destroying the image. Next, I'm going to attempt to reduce the glow on her face where it's really popping, and I don't know what I'm doing. So I figured I'd delete this part from the video and then reconsidered just to show that I'm still learning, and learning is still a part of my process. In this section, I'm removing the underwire of her top and the white of her bottom so that it all just appears green. Otherwise, it just kind of looks funny there. It's not what I want you to focus on. I do a little bit of stamp tool. I do a little bit of paint just to add some shadow there. This is my first attempt doing it in this set, so the process wasn't super refined. I think I got a lot better at it in future images. Now I'm jumping back into Lightroom, and I'm going to paint all over the water around her. I'm using an auto mask function in Lightroom, which is in the latest version. Previously, I had to manually paint all around the model. It was incredibly time consuming, and this speeds up my process a ton. It is incredibly valuable. So anyway, selects all around the model, and then I just do a few adjustments. I reset it so that it's no longer reducing the exposure. I just do some adjustment sliders on the color and make it the color I want it to be. And then I'm just going to do some real gentle adjustments on, say, bringing the brightness down. So again, her face doesn't look too bright where my photography wasn't perfect. I can correct that in Lightroom here. And a little bit with the lights, the darks, and the black balancing. I do a little vignette around the edges so it's dark around the corners. I think it makes her pop a little bit more and just makes the image look more professional. And then I'm going to do a rough selection of her body, and I'm going to bring the shadows up a little bit and increase the brightness as well. So the darks are darker and the whites are whiter, and that's just going to give her a more three-dimensional look instead of just like a two-dimensional image floating in the water. And there you have it. That's the final image. I will say I did go a little bit in later. There's still a little bit of pink like in her legs that I made a little bit more flesh colored. It just didn't look perfectly natural to me, so I made a little bit of adjustment there. But this is basically the final image that I came up with, and I think it's quite beautiful. I think it would work great for any float center to convey the beautiful image of floating. And yeah, this is available for anybody well, there are 3 different locations you could get this image. One is on Patreon. There are 2 tiers. $10 tier means you get 10 images every single month. So if you signed up for this in 2019 December, you would get it in early January. It'd be sent out to you, 10 images. For the $15 tier, this set I think has 40 images, which is higher than normal. Usually there's at least 20, but there are a lot of good images in here that I wanted to put out to the community. So yeah, the $15 tier, again, if you sign up December 2019, you can get all of these images. It's really up to you to decide whether you want, 10 I think is great for most people. For other people, they really want the exact image or where the text will fit perfectly for any time they create a newsletter or an Instagram post, or they just use a lot of float imagery. The $15 tier makes a lot more sense there. I try to keep both of them, at an inexpensive price as well. The third location is in a gallery. I'll include the link below on Pixieset. And here you can purchase previous sets. They're released about a month after they're released on Patreon. So this one won't be up until February. But you can buy the entire albums, you can buy collections, and you can purchase specific images. And they're all very high resolution. So Yeah, there you have it, guys. Thanks so much on this little journey with me and editing a photo. Thanks so much. See you soon.